40% Merlot, 40% Malbec, and 20% Cab Sauv.
Tastes good for you. 2,000.
It's not that good.
Welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. The world in your glass.
Hi, I'm Jameson Fink, Senior Digital Editor at Wine Enthusiast, and welcome to Episode 2. When you purchase what you know will be a delicious wine, it's hard to be patient, but sometimes for a good wine to become great, it does take time and patience. Often the best way to make that happen is to put the bottle away somewhere you don't have to think about it.
My name is Lauren Buzzio. I'm the Tasting Director and Senior Editor at Wine Enthusiast magazine.
We're in the cellar room, too, which is amazing. We're in our tasting room at World Headquarters for Wine Enthusiast. And this would be a great opportunity to talk about wine, and specifically wines to cellar, very specifically our top 100 cellar selections. I think it's really interesting to look at the list and compare where the wines are from, countries, grapes. It's a really fascinating list. But I guess my first question is how do you decide what becomes a cellar selection, and specifically one that gets in the top 100?
Gosh, well, this list, from a technical standpoint, is culled from all of the wines that are designated a cellar selection throughout the past 12 issues. So from there, we start with again all of those selections. We whittle it down to the top 100, the creme de la creme. And how do we do that? It is definitely not an easy process, but it is one that is very rewarding and very fun to go through. Basically, we take a look at the production sizes, we take a look at the availability, but mainly for the cellar selection list, we take a look at the reputation and the provenance of those wines, of those wineries. And really, this list is about those iconic, world-class, world-renowned wines that are just going to cellar, mature, evolve just so beautifully.
Look, it's a list that's dominated by red wines, but there are a lot of sweet wines and dry white wines that can that I think, in my mind, they're still kind of in the mind of like I'm starting to collect wine and cellar wine. I think not a lot of people are thinking red, and they're not thinking white and dessert wine or sweet wines. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree, and it's actually funny that you bring that up because I just had my firstborn child was born in 2015, and of course I'm starting to look to buy wines to open on his 21st birthday, naturally, although he does enjoy a pinky dip every now and then currently, so I know he's going to be ready for it. Yeah. But absolutely, immediately I turned to the sticky wines. The first wine that I purchased is actually Molineux straw wine out of the Swartland region of South Africa. I have a good history with that wine, and I know that it will certainly last well beyond his 21st birthday, so I might need to buy, I don't even know how many cases, and we can have one, every year after his 21st birthday. But certainly second to that, I will absolutely turn to white wines. Some of my favorite wines. First of all, let me say, generally, the American public drinks white wines far too young. There's a lot of wines, I understand, that might be at a certain sweet spot price-wise that might be best drunk young, but generally we as a nation consume white wines far too early. They develop much more complexity, much more balance, much more finesse with even just a year or two more in the bottle. We're always obsessed with finding the freshest, latest vintage on shelves, and that's not always necessarily the best thing to do. So definitely cellaring whites is something that we do try to include on this list, obviously, but something that I definitely turn to personally, especially white Burgundy. I know I'm going to be buying some of those from Rylo's birth year to cellar away for a long, long time.
And what about if you're kind of like trying to value hunter, are there regions that you think like, hey, there are great wines from this region that you can cellar for a long time and you don't have to spend, the value is there?
Right. For the top 100 Best Buys, that's very focused on the quality to price ratio, okay? All of the wines on the top 100 Best Buys list are going to be priced at $15 or under. For the Enthusiast 100, it's also quite value-driven, although we also look to other variables. For the Cellar Selection list, we really don't put too much of a weight on the price of the wine because, again, we're looking for those best and most iconic examples that we know are going to cellar. That being said, though, about half of the list is priced at $50 or under. So there's certainly opportunity for people of any budget looking for wines from any price range to certainly pick up wines to throw in their cellar for drinking 5, 10, 20 years down the road.
And the old retail wine person would say, oh, buy a case and I'll give you a 10% discount.
There you go. Get them for even cheaper. In terms of regions to look for that great value, though, that still represent wines that are perfectly capable of cellaring for the long term, I'd say that you can find some beautiful reserve wines from Portugal. Certainly Spain, while you can definitely get wines for upwards of $100. There's still plenty of beautiful selections coming from Rioja, Ribera del Duero, Toro that are certainly affordable and definitely can last for the long haul. So for red wines, certainly I would go to those two regions to start. For whites, I would probably turn to Austria. You can find a lot of great values of those white wines, whether it's Riesling or Gruner, that again can age beautifully and gracefully for the next 5 to 10 years at least.
That's excellent advice about Austria. I love those. I've had just 10-year-old Gruner Veltliners that kind of opened my world to wow, these dry white wines can age. And I'd also add Australian Riesling, like Clare Valley Rieslings. When I went to Australia, I brought back a bottle of Polish Hill from Grosset, and it was 10 years old, and I was like, wow, this is incredible, because it still is, really, it drank very young for a 10-year-old dry white wine, too. So yeah, it's great that there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's sweet red or white, to start building a collection. And you mentioned white Burgundy, and you mentioned a sweet wine. What are the wines that you personally like to hold on to? What's in your cellar?
What's in my cellar? Too much.
I can help you with that.
I've had many offers. What is predominantly in my cellar, admittedly, thanks to my history, my background, my heritage, is going to be a lot of Italian wines. I am a sucker for Barolo and anything from Piedmont. So, yeah, the majority of what I've got is definitely hailing from my motherland. But aside for that, I'd say definitely Spain. Again, those red wines, the value for the quality that they represent, it's world class. And there's such a versatility of styles also. You can have some of the more traditional rustic houses that go for a little bit more of an austere, tighter, leaner style, or you can veer towards the more modern, sort of plusher, a little bit more sexy and seductively oaked wines, and just about everything in between. So yeah, if you get to know your houses, you can definitely pick up a beautiful variety of styles from within one winemaking region.
That reminds me, one last category of wine I forgot to mention is sparkling, specifically champagne. And I think that's something that people, just sort of pop and pour too. But I know there are a lot of people who love to collect and age champagne. Can you talk about champagne as a category as a cellar wine?
The most exciting thing this year, obviously, is that we have our number one wine as a sparkling wine. It is the Champagne, the 2002 Brut from Krug, which was just recently released because the house actually held back the wine, knowing that it needed more time to actually continue to come into its own. It's been hailed as one of the finest wines that Krug has produced. It's been the vintage has been lauded as one of the best in recent champagne history. So it's absolutely a world-class wine that, despite being the 2002, is still young and fresh and fruity and vibrant and has a long, long life ahead of it. So the exciting thing I think about this selection as well is you could certainly drink it now. No one's going to kill you for it. You're going to enjoy it. It's beautiful. But again, it's still a wine that still has so much life and so much potential left in it that you leave it in your cellar for another 5, 10, 15 years at least. Aged vintage champagne is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Don't you agree?
Well, actually, I like to drink champagne on the young side. I just am when it gets kind of oxidized and too nutty for me and maybe a little like mushroomy. I kind of feel the same way about white Burgundy. I just like my palate preference is for the fresher primary side of things. I'm usually most intrigued. Actually, I'm most intrigued by wines when they're at that point, that kind of sweet spot where there are secondary characteristics, but there's still plenty of fruit, that kind of tightrope. To me, that's when a wine is at my drinking peak. I haven't had a lot of pleasure over things that have sort of, some people love those, especially I guess Burgundy would be a great example with red and white, those kind of, like real intense mushroomy forest floor type of flavors. And I would rather err on the side of, I would rather err on the side of drinking it too young than waiting too long, which I think a lot of people would agree with. But yeah, I'll probably get a lot of hate mail for saying that. Saying that. I welcome your comments.
You have enough nuttiness in and of your personality that you don't need any more in your wines. I get it. No.
Well, thanks, Lauren. I think the great thing about this list, and you can see it all at winemag.com, look for the top 100 cellar selections, that it's red, it's white, it's sweet, it's sparkling, it's from the United States, it's from France, it's from Austria, Australia. It's a really diverse list, and price-wise too. So I think when you look like cellar selections, people might think it's some maybe narrow category, but it's actually a really diverse category. Just like the top 100 values or the best buys or anything really. There's a lot to explore there. So thanks for educating me about the list.
Hey, I'm Tom Douglas, and I'm chef owner of many of Seattle's fine restaurants. And I'm standing right here in my overcrowded wine cellar, which is better than being undercrowded. I tell my nieces and nephews when they come to visit, you can go straight away or go to the left, but you cannot go to the right in my wine cellar, because that's where things are either special to me or they're not ready to drink. And so I'm constantly kind of going through and picking out the ones that are ready and then moving them to the left. So, but for me, I like anniversary wines. I think that's a big deal. So if we go over to the other end, you'll see some 1958s. I'm 58 years old now, and I have some wines set aside for my 60th birthday. I have a 58 Port, a 58 California Cabernet, several 58 Barolos and Barbarescos. So I'm ready for my birthday. But, other wines are wine guys, just delicious wine. And then there's people that I've met in my travels that I collect their wines. Like, I think a super value in the Nebbiolo marketplace is Produttori Barbaresco or Cantina del Pino. And so I collect those wines. And you'll see I have verticals of those all the way back to the, in the Bartolo Mascarello wines, I have them back to the 50s. So it's a fun opportunity. I've been around the world, especially through wine country in France and Italy and Spain. And so I just buy remembrances of my trips. And then I buy what I like to drink. For example, I'm not a big port guy, right? So you'll notice in my cellar, there might be a half a dozen bottles of port, and that's about it. Or sweet wine in general. I'll have a little bit of Yquem or a little bit of Riesec, Sauternes. But outside of that, I'm more of a red wine drinker. And again, in large format. You can see I have stacks of Magnums everywhere you look. Wine loves a good meal. And so one of the things I think about when I'm cooking dinner is I immediately start to think about what it is out of my cellar I'm going to drink with it. Last night, I had the last of my white truffles that I had got from Italy, and I drank a beautiful 2004 Barbaresco with those. And I had more truffles than you needed for one person, but I was the only person here. So I had a big old pot of white truffle risotto and a whole bottle of Barbaresco. Sorry you couldn't make it.
Marshall Tilden III, Director of Sales.
Marshall, we're outside the Wine Enthusiast headquarters in Valhalla. It's a beautiful day, sunny, 55 degrees. If we were bottles of wine that we wanted to store for a long time, how would we be doing out here today?
We'd be thrilled. We probably couldn't find a better temperature that we want to be sitting in. Humidity, we might want a little bit higher levels, but in terms of the temperature and how cool it is, this is perfect.
Except, of course, we'd want to be out of the sun.
Absolutely. These UV rays are no good for us right now.
Well, that's great that we're outside on this kind of perfect day to talk about how to store your wine. And we've talked about here are some great wines to put in your cellar, but now you have to figure out, well, what do we do with them? And I'm thinking about my second apartment in New York City this summer. It was sweltering. We didn't have air conditioning. We had no air circulation because of my roommate's allergies, so we kept a lot of the windows closed. She's a lovely person, by the way, but it was pretty miserable. So if I lived in this New York City apartment, it's hot. I don't have I don't have a basement. I don't have anything. What are some of the things that I could do to keep my wine safe when I want to drink it 1 or 2 or more years from now?
Sure. The most important thing is always temperature. There's a lot of enemies of wine and different issues you can come across that can harm wines for the longer term storage. Temperature being the most important, not only to keep around this 55 that we're sitting in now, but to avoid the fluctuations. High levels and then low levels. Going between 75, 80 and warmer and down to 40, 45 is just as bad. It's like skunking beer. And the same effect can happen with wine. Light, like we're talking about. So if you're in a small apartment, a lot of people will keep a blanket or even a wet towel over those bottles that they want to try and store for a little bit of time, because these UV rays can really affect the tannins. It breaks down the phenolics of the wine. And the wet towel works because of another one of the enemies, which is lack of humidity. Most of these Cellar Selections and better bottles throughout the world do have corks. There's screw tops on some, and some other closures are being used. But with corks, if that humidity falls too low, under 50% for long periods of time, they dry out, oxygen gets in, the wine gets oxidized, and you got a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I always just think, it's just about temperature. All I have to do is keep it a constant temperature. But I think one thing that people underestimate is that humidity level, especially for the long-term health of the cork.
Yeah, it's huge. And, on the other end, over-humidifying and having higher levels where the corks can actually sweat can also affect the wines and what's inside the bottle, too. So humidity is an extremely important enemy to be aware of. Another one is vibration. Bottles like to be left alone. They like to be sitting untouched and unmoved, and it has to do with the sediment that's in there. It also has to do with, the vibration, the movement can cause heat and actually can not only warm up the wine, but can shift the corks over time. So these wines, especially these Cellar Selections that are meant to be aged, the best thing to do is to keep them in a dark area, as close to 55 as possible, which in a very warm, un-air-conditioned city apartment is tough, and out of the light. I mean, those are the key elements.
And is there a range of humidity, like a certain percentage humidity that's best?
Yeah. Ideally, you want to have humidity above 50% is fine. 50 is kind of like the Mendoza line that you want to keep it above. And anywhere from 65, 70, once you start teetering above 75% for longer periods, you start getting to that too much humidity range. But anywhere between like 50 and 75 is really safe for a longer time. And people always think about the 4 enemies of wine being temperature, humidity, light, vibration. Odor is actually the lesser known 5th. And in apartments where, let's say there's a lot of cats or, just unwelcome odors, over time it can affect the wine. And that's why a lot of people won't store cigars in the same area as their wine. They don't want that cigar odor to come in, and it can happen over time. So that's another thing to think about in small apartments and really anywhere that you're holding wine for longer periods.
All right, now let's say I've moved out of my stifling New York City apartment. I've hit the jackpot. I've bought a big, beautiful house with a basement. It seems like I've got it all set. I got a basement. I got plenty of room. But what are some of the kind of things you need to look out for when you're considering, like, hey, look, I've got the space, I've got the money, I've got the time, I want to build a cellar. What are still some of the things that I need to think about that maybe people don't think about until it's like said and done?
Sure. So, and that's super common, right? Someone comes into a basement and they move in the middle of the fall and, oh man, my basement's 55 degrees. This is great. I'm putting in the racking and we're going to build the cellar. And all of a sudden winter rolls around, that basement's 45 degrees. And then all of a sudden summer rolls around, that basement's 65, 70 degrees. So, like we're talking about, that fluctuation back and forth really still can happen in basements unless they are all subgrade and the concrete is 20 to 24 inches, which these days houses aren't built the way they used to be. This whole storage is based off of the old French caves, right? People used to bury their wines down below, and it held this 50 to 60 degrees with this humidity, and that's what storage we're trying to replicate, whether it's natural in somebody's cellar or whether we're using a cooling system or something to really get the ideal climate for wine storage.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Marshall. Thanks for all the tips. And I think whether you live in a hot, cramped New York City apartment or a large house with a basement, we definitely have some good strategies to think about keeping your wines safe and keeping them well long-term, so when you enjoy them, they're as perfect as they should be.
Hi, I'm Thierry Rautureau, the chef in a hat, owner of Luc in Madison Valley and Lulay Kitchen and Bar downtown Seattle, Washington. I have a great passion for storing wine and for cellaring it and watch it age, and most importantly, wait for the right day where I'm going, not today, and then, today is the day. A few days ago, this was the perfect example. We had a brisket. I cooked this brisket, and I was like, oh my God, this 5-hour brisket, I'm going to have a great bottle of wine. I already know it's going to be the Rhone Valley. It's going to be aged. And I came down here, and I grabbed, I looked at about 20 different bottles, from Gigal, Côte Rôtie to, and I end up with a Cornas, 2001 Cornas, because I'm like, oh, that's perfect. That's going to be fine. I'm going to decant this for 5 hours, and then it's going to be the perfect wine to drink. And it was incredible. I have a great passion for storing wine and for cellaring it. Like, for example, a 1995 Leonetti Merlot is a great bottle of wine. It's not quite ready to drink. It's only 20 years old, so we got a few more days to go with that. I've got some, Chaleur Estate, De Lille, 1992. So, one thing I love about wine is that great pleasure you have when you're going through your cellar. Like, I'm so geeky about it. I can spend like an hour in here and go, okay, I'm getting cold, let me get out of here. But otherwise, I don't realize time go by. You're just looking back. But, like I pulled this bottle of Asteroid 1998, which is a Pouilly Fussé from Didier Dagneau. There was only 6 bottles supposedly that came in America that year. And I still have that bottle. I'm so anxious to drink it. And thank God this guy makes, beautiful wine and beautiful, very long-term white wine. Those are Pouilly Fussé, a white wine from the Loire Valley. And I'm very excited. I can't wait to drink this. But, 1998, half bottle, Asteroid, very hard to find. There's not many that come in this country. So I cherish this little baby very much. I don't look at it very often, but I know it's there. And I'm like, okay, so when is it going to be the perfect day? And I still don't know what the perfect day is. Or this Magnum here in a box, Barbaresco. I don't have too many Italian wines. I always joke about Italian wines with Tom, of course. Tom and Jackie gave me this for my birthday. A nice Magnum of Barbaresco. Very nice of them. I wrote it on it, and of course I wrote the date, 9/26/2015. How's that? This is going to be in here for quite some time. I'm going to have to look at his name and his signature on my box for a while. This is a 3-liter, which is a double Magnum of Chateau Bellevue, which is a Saint-Emilion. And I bought this quite a while back. And I just drank one a couple days ago when I was at Dale and Leslie Shioli's boathouse. We gave a dinner to the Symphony of Seattle, and there was 15 people. And this is when you open that kind of wine. A big bottle, that's what this is for. When you have a big party, you just open a big bottle. It's very cool. Beaucastel, I have a Châteauneuf du Pape Beaucastel 89 Magnum that was given to me by a friend a long time ago, like maybe 20 years ago. And I can't wait to drink this because that friend has actually passed. So eventually, we're going to have to do a little hoo-ha about him and just say, hey, we're drinking this in your honor. And it's a Beaucastel, a Châteauneuf du Pape. It's 89, so it's got plenty of life left in it. But within the next 5 years, we're going to drink that bottle and give him a big shout out.
This podcast is produced by Large Media, L-A-R-J Media. Wine Enthusiast is made possible by grapes, sunshine, and wine, and by the hard-working editors who bring you news and information on your favorite beverage every day. If you like what we're doing, share our podcast with your friends and give us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. For more fun wine information, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Wine Enthusiast.